Hello students, welcome back. Today we are starting another very important series, okay? And before I start with my lecture today, I just wanted to start off by saying that if you want something you have never had, you must be willing to do something you have never done. Yes, absolutely. So if you want to excel in your MBBS, if you want to excel in your medical studies, in your entrances, in the next exams, yes, you will have to put in that extra effort. But do not get fearful, okay? I'm not trying to scare you that you will have to study a lot. But you will have to improve every single day. For example, you can just improve by increasing 5 to 10 minutes every day. Okay, you can just start by increasing your study time by 10 minutes every day. Slowly, okay, with this increased amount of time, you are going to outperform others, and this is what I want to really tell you. So by saying that you will have to do something that you have never done doesn't mean that you will have to study for 20 hours, 24 hours in a day. No, I did not say that. I'm just saying that if you are reading for 4 hours every day, start reading 4 hours and add an extra 10 minutes every day. My saying is just this. So these small changes will make a very big impact in your life. Okay, all the different kinds of distractions that you are having with your phone, with your tablet, okay, with the television, with the Netflix series, Amazon series that you are watching. I'm not telling you that don't watch them. I am saying watch them, but watch 10 minutes less. This is all that I am saying. So this is a very meaningful quote by Thomas Jefferson, and today I came across this quote, so I thought I will share with you. So without wasting any more time, let us start with our topic today. So myself, Dr. Gibran Ahmed, presents to you Simply Pathology, and today we are going to start the part 2 of the basics of the liver pathology, and today's lecture is very important. We are going to see and read about liver failure. So let's start. So liver failure can be of 3 basic types. It can be acute liver failure, characterized by a sudden and massive hepatic destruction. There can be chronic liver failure, which follows years or decades of progressive liver injury. And there is another entity called as acute on chronic liver failure. So here what has happened, that here there is a chronic disease, okay, that is having a flare of activity or an acute injury, which is overwhelming the well compensated chronic liver disease. Okay, so whatever be the consequence of the liver failure, 80 to 90% of the hepatic functional capacity must be lost before hepatic failure ensues. So this tells us that the liver is having a store, a liver is having quite a big capacity. Liver has a quite a regenerative capacity. As you will remember my lectures on injury and inflammation, you will recall that liver is having a very large regenerative capacity. So almost 80 to 90% of the functional capacity of the liver has to be compromised in order for hepatic failure to ensue. And once that happens, what is the treatment of choice? So nowadays liver transplantation has become very common. Okay, so if you do not treat liver failure, the mortality rate can be as high as 80%. So what is acute liver failure? So acute liver failure has been defined as an acute liver illness which is associated with encephalopathy and coagulopathy that occurs within 26 weeks of initial liver injury in the absence of pre-existing liver disease. So note the terms that are important in this definition. You cannot miss on these terms like encephalopathy, coagulopathy, and within 26 weeks of the initial liver injury. Now the term acute liver failure is synonymous or has been used synonymously with fulminant liver failure. Mind that this term fulminant liver failure, though is an old term, but still it is widespread in use. What are the most important causes of acute liver failure? So the most important cause is acetaminophen poisoning. Around 50% of cases of acute liver failure is because of acetaminophen poisoning. Second is due to autoimmune hepatitis. Third is acute hepatitis A or B infection. In Southeast Asia, especially in India, the more common cause is hepatitis B or E infection, okay, which is more common in Asia. Okay, other important causes of acute hepatic failure are the abnormalities of the blood flow, metabolic disorders, and malignancies. Now here again very important MCQs will come in. So most commonly, what are the malignancies which involve the hepatocyte? So the metastatic tumors so among them most common is leukemia and lymphoma, 33% of the case. Again, the metastasis from the breast cancer account for 30% and metastasis from the colon cancer accounts for 7%. Okay, so one very important concept is that the onset of symptoms, so from the onset of symptoms, okay, till the liver failure, okay, that is happening, so the time duration between these two is very important. Okay, the duration is very important. So the duration between the onset of symptoms and the onset of liver failure is very important. Now this duration can be very short, approximately can be 1 week. So in case of drug toxicity, for example acetaminophen toxicity, the duration can be very less. So this is very important determining factor, okay, and also prognostic factor. And in case of acute liver failure, the duration between the onset of symptom and liver failure can be as short as 1 week, as in case of acetaminophen toxicity. Now, acute liver failure is characterized by massive hepatic necrosis. And what is the mechanism? So there can be direct toxic damage, as in case of acetaminophen poisoning, or there can be direct toxic damage along with immune mediated hepatocyte injury, as in case of hepatitis virus infection. Yes, you're right. So when we will read about hepatitis, then you will understand that it is not the virus which is causing damage to the liver. No. It is our own immune system which is causing damage to our liver in hepatitis. Okay. Moving ahead, so if you do a microscopic examination in case of acute liver failure or acute hepatic failure, it is characterized by massive hepatic necrosis. Plus there are broad regions of parenchymal loss. Plus there are surrounding islands of regenerating hepatocytes. So I have made these 3 points separate and I'm going to show you with the help of diagram. So first of all, look at how the normal liver cells look like and how does a hepatic necrosis look like. Okay, this is a second diagram wherein it shows massive hepatic necrosis. So if you see, this is the central vein, this is the zone 3. And around the central vein, as we know, is the zone 3, and it is characterized over here by massive centrilobular necrosis with inflammatory cell infiltration. So you can see that in this area of necrosis, you also have inflammatory cells over there. And over here, we are having the normal hepatocytes. Okay, so this is how a massive hepatic necrosis will look like under the microscope. Okay, again this is another diagram showing the same thing. Again these are normal hepatocytes and this is the central vein, and around the central vein the centrilobular hepatocytes undergo hepatocyte necrosis and the area has been earmarked by arrowhead. Okay. So moving ahead, I just wanted to show you this another diagram. So I had also used one term. So these areas which are actually little bit more dark, if you see, okay, these are areas of zone 3 hepatocellular necrosis because of acetaminophen toxicity. Okay, and if you see over here, these areas which are star marked, okay, which are marked by the star, so these are actually surrounding islands of regenerating hepatocytes. Okay, so these star areas are surrounding islands of regenerating hepatocytes. Okay. So now moving ahead, I'll just repeat. So we have seen the massive hepatic necrosis, we have seen the broad regions of parenchymal loss, and we have also seen the surrounding islands of regenerating hepatocytes. So grossly, if you look at the liver, okay, initially the liver is enlarged. In acute liver failure, initially the liver is enlarged due to hepatocyte swelling and edema. But in course of time, because there is parenchymal destruction and necrosis, the liver becomes small and shrunken. So this is how a liver in case of acetaminophen poisoning looks like. Okay, small shrunken liver. So now moving ahead, so rarely acute liver failure can be associated with widespread dysfunction of the liver cells without necrosis or cell death. So what I want to say over here, that sometimes acute liver failure can occur even without hepatocyte necrosis. Okay, so in this case, the cell does not die, but the cell becomes dysfunctional, means the cell stops to function, and there is a mitochondrial dysfunction in this case. So what are the conditions in which there can be acute liver failure without hepatocyte death or necrosis. So it is diffuse microvesicular steatosis related to fatty liver of pregnancy and idiosyncratic reactions to toxins like valproate and tetracycline. Now you must be thinking, sir, what is the meaning of idiosyncratic? So if you have read in pharmacology, there are certain reactions which are common, which can affect all people. Okay, so some drugs, they have certain reactions, and that reaction is present in majority of the population. But there are certain drug reactions that only certain individuals will show, only few people show. These reactions are actually called as the idiosyncratic reactions. Now, also, there are acute liver failure can also occur in case of immunodeficiency. So there is immunodeficiency associated acute liver failure that can occur in case of HIV, post-transplant immunosuppression, as well as viral infections like cytomegalovirus, herpes simplex virus, and adenovirus infections. Okay. So now moving ahead, what are the clinical features of acute liver failure? So the patient will present with nausea, vomiting, jaundice, and this can be followed by encephalopathy and coagulation defects. So what is encephalopathy? Just stay tuned. Okay, just in the later part of the same video, I am going to explain what is encephalopathy. So, okay, what are the other clinical features? So if you look at the laboratory reports, okay, initially they will be increased in liver transaminases. So what are the liver transaminases or liver enzymes? AST and ALT. Okay, alanine transaminase and aspartate transaminase. So both these levels will increase. And why will this increase? Because as you all know, the hepatocytes have undergone necrosis, and in necrosis there is damage to the plasma membrane and enzymes are going to leak. Yes, if you go back to your basic lectures on cell injury and necrosis, you will recall, okay, that is why the liver transaminase level will increase initially, but later on the levels are going to decline. Why? Because now the hepatocytes have died and there is no more hepatocyte which is left actually. Okay, so if you will see that there is a decline in the level of transaminases, okay, so remember, it is not something which is a good sign. In fact, it is a very bad sign. Okay, so decline in the level of transaminases with worsening jaundice, coagulopathy and encephalopathy, it is pointing towards a bad prognosis and it is not a sign of improvement. Why? Because no more hepatocytes are available. Okay, all the hepatocytes are dead, and therefore there is no source of transaminase now. So it means that only a few viable hepatocytes are left. If you do not do any intervention, if no intervention is taken, it can lead to multi-organ failure and death. So now, what are the other manifestations of acute liver failure? So we are going to discuss in details these manifestations, namely cholestasis, hepatic encephalopathy, coagulopathy, portal hypertension and hepatorenal syndrome. So what is cholestasis? Okay, so first of all, why cholestasis occurs? So if you will all remember, okay, that the hepatocyte is a site of synthesis of the bile, and in between the two hepatocytes, that is the two abutting hepatocytes, we are having the bile canaliculi. So in case of necrosis and injury, there is cell swelling, and that is going to impinge on the bile canaliculi and it will actually obstruct the flow of the bile. So because of alterations in the flow of the bile, okay, as well as because of retention of the bile, there is yellowish discoloration of the skin, which is called as jaundice, and yellowish discoloration of the eyes, which is called as icterus. Even this retention of bile can lead to infections. So just wanted to show you, so this is a liver that is actually affected by cholestasis. See how this liver is looking greenish. So there is a greenish discoloration of this liver. Okay, look at this person, look at the skin of this person. Okay, the facial skin has become totally green. So this is jaundice, yellowish discoloration of the skin. And look over here, look at the eyes of this gentleman. Okay, the eyes have completely become yellow. So there's a yellowish discoloration of the sclera called as icterus. Okay, so now moving ahead, we are going to see what is hepatic encephalopathy. So what happens that patients who are suffering from acute liver failure or chronic liver failure, both conditions can actually precipitate hepatic encephalopathy. So the basic mechanism that is there, that hepatic encephalopathy occurs because of an excessive levels of ammonia in the body. So you all know that normally ammonia is produced in our GIT from microorganisms and also from our enterocytes or during glutamine metabolism. Okay, so normally this ammonia is transported in the portal vein. So via the portal vein, this ammonia from the GIT will be taken to the liver. And over here, as you will recall, the ammonia is metabolized in the urea cycle. But in severe liver disease, this detoxification mechanism, that is the urea cycle, is compromised. Why it is compromised? Because the liver has undergone massive necrosis. Okay, so there is a liver failure. So liver cannot metabolize the ammonia. Okay, so in case of severe liver disease, this ammonia levels in the blood is going to increase, will enter the brain and will lead to hepatic encephalopathy, wherein this ammonia will lead to direct injury to the neurons, plus it is going to lead to cerebral edema, because ultimately this ammonia actually converts to glutamine, and there is an alteration of the metabolism of this glutamine which is leading to all the harmful effects leading to cerebral edema. Okay, now what are the clinical features? If you see the clinical features of hepatic encephalopathy, the patient can present with clinical features ranging from subtle behavioral abnormalities to marked confusion and stupor, and ultimately the patient can go into deep coma and even death. Okay, so what are the signs? The patient will show signs of rigidity and hyperreflexia. The reflexes will become very hyper. So what I want to say that over here, that one important sign in case of hepatic encephalopathy which the clinicians use is asterixis. So what is asterixis? It is a non-rhythmic rapid extension flexion movement of the hand and extremities, which is best seen when the arms are held in extension with dorsiflexed wrist. I know you have not understood this, so I will make you understand with the help of this diagram. So see, this person is now eliciting this sign. So see, the arm, it is extended and the wrist has been dorsiflexed. So when such a patient is made to do this, what happens ultimately, that the patient will be having flapping tremors like this. This is called as asterixis. So there is a flexion and extension at the level of the wrist joint, and this is called as asterixis. I urge everyone to go and see any video which is demonstrating asterixis, okay, as it is a classical sign of hepatic encephalopathy. Okay, so moving ahead, if you see the clinical feature, as we have already seen, and the signs we have already seen, the three important signs are rigidity, hyperreflexia and asterixis. Now the second important manifestation of acute liver failure is coagulopathy. So why there is coagulopathy? Because we know that liver is the site of synthesis of both vitamin K dependent as well as vitamin K independent coagulation factors. So what are the vitamin K dependent factors which are produced in the liver? They are factors number 2, 7, 9 and 10. And what are the vitamin K independent factors which are produced in the liver? That is factors number 5, 11, 12 and fibrinogen. So in case of severe liver disease, what is going to happen? There is going to be easy bruisability, or there can be bleeding, and this bleeding can sometimes be fatal if it is an intracranial bleeding. Okay, so liver is also responsible for removing the activated coagulation factors. Yes, so any activated coagulation factors in the liver, they are removed in our body. So any activated coagulation factors in our body is removed by the liver. So if the liver is compromised, if the liver cannot perform its function of inactivating the activated factors, ultimately it is going to lead to disseminated intravascular coagulation, also called as DIC. Now the other important manifestation is portal hypertension. Now portal hypertension can occur in both acute as well as in case of chronic liver failure, but it is most common in chronic liver failure. Okay, you have to understand that portal hypertension can affect both acute as well as chronic liver failure, but it is much more or far more common in chronic liver failure condition. So it occurs when there is an obstruction to the flow of blood in the portal venous system, and the obstruction can be at the level of prehepatic, intrahepatic or post-hepatic. Okay, so portal hypertension, which is affecting acute liver failure, most commonly obstruction is intrahepatic and it develops within days to weeks, whereas the portal hypertension affecting the chronic liver failure can develop at any level, prehepatic, intrahepatic, post-hepatic, and it develops over months to years. Okay, we will read in details about portal hypertension in my next video. Okay, so Now very important thing that we are going to read. Another important manifestation of acute liver failure is hepatorenal syndrome. Now it is a form of renal failure which is occurring in individuals with liver failure in whom there is no intrinsic morphologic or functional cause for liver for kidney dysfunction. Means the kidney is fine structurally and functionally, the kidney is fine, but because of unknown mechanisms the liver is failing, and along with that even the kidney starts to fail, but the kidney has no problem on its own. Okay, the liver failure is actually causing the renal failure. Okay, so the patient basically presents with decreased urine output, increased in the level of urea and creatinine. So the mechanism of injury that they have shown is portal hypertension along with increased nitric oxide production. Okay, it leads to systemic vasodilatation with a diminished renal perfusion. So they are saying that because of portal hypertension and because of increased nitric oxide production, there is a venous pooling of blood in the systemic circulation which will lead to a reduced renal perfusion. This in turn is going to activate the renin-angiotensin system, and as you all know that once this RAS system is activated, okay, the sympathetic system is activated actually, and this is causing further vasoconstriction and further diminishing the renal blood flow and GFR, precipitating renal failure. Now renal failure over here is reversible if the liver function is restored, for example by liver transplantation. So I want to tell you one more thing, that the hepatorenal syndrome can affect not only acute fulminant hepatic failure but can also affect the chronic liver failure cases like cirrhosis, alcoholic liver disease and metastatic tumors. Okay. So now we are going to start with the chronic liver failure. Okay, so we have read about acute liver failure and now we are going to read about chronic liver failure. So liver failure in chronic liver disease is most often associated with an advanced fibrosis or cirrhosis, a condition marked by diffuse remodeling of the liver into parenchymal nodules, often regenerative in nature, surrounded by fibrous bands and a variable degree of vascular shunting, often portosystemic. So I want to tell you very important points in this definition. So number one important point is that I have used the term fibrosis or cirrhosis. Secondly, very important point is that it is a diffuse remodeling. That means the entire liver is involved. Thirdly, we are having certain nodules, okay, which are regenerative parenchymal nodules, and these parenchymal nodules are surrounded by fibrous bands. Okay, and there is variable degree of vascular shunting, alteration of blood supply, okay, leading to portal hypertension. So these are few important points that you have to understand in a case of chronic liver failure. So the leading cause of chronic liver failure are chronic hepatitis B, chronic hepatitis C, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and alcoholic liver disease. So although cirrhosis and chronic liver failure are often associated, they are not synonymous. They are saying that, so what they mean by this sentence is that all cases of cirrhosis will lead to chronic liver failure. This is not the fact. Means not all cases of cirrhosis will lead to liver failure, and not all end stage chronic liver disease will lead to cirrhosis. So you have to understand that the term chronic liver failure and cirrhosis, they are not synonymous. Means not all cirrhosis will culminate into chronic liver failure, neither all end stage liver disease, chronic liver disease will lead to cirrhosis. For example, there are multiple conditions like primary biliary cholangitis, primary sclerosing cholangitis, nodular regenerative hyperplasia, chronic schistosomiasis, fibropolycystic liver disease. So these are all end stage liver disease, but they are not accompanied by cirrhosis. Okay, even at the end stage they are not characterized by cirrhosis. So this is just I wanted to show you. So on the other hand, there are often certain conditions like autoimmune hepatitis or even suppressed hepatitis B or C infection, okay, which do not progress to end stage liver disease even if cirrhosis is present. So there are certain conditions, okay, as we saw before, that in the end stage liver disease also there is no cirrhosis, and there are certain conditions of cirrhosis in which the disease is not progressing to end stage liver disease. Now, a very important important line that I'm going to tell you is that the term cirrhosis implies a severe chronic disease, but it is not a specific diagnosis. Okay, so the term cirrhosis is a very widespread term. Okay, and it just tells us that there is some chronic inflammation or a chronic injurious process that has been going on for a long time, but it does not pinpoint towards a particular diagnosis, because there are a number of conditions which can lead to cirrhosis. So cirrhosis, okay, there are sometimes, okay, we have cirrhosis without any identifiable cause, and such kind of cirrhosis is called as cryptogenic cirrhosis. Now moving ahead, now cirrhosis, it occurs diffusely throughout the liver, okay, and which is composed of two important elements. So these elements are very important. Okay, you have to mention these elements in your answer. So it is composed of regenerating parenchymal nodules, and which is surrounded by dense bands of fibrosis throughout the liver, which can be highlighted by use of special stains for collagen called as Maison's trichome. So with the help of diagram, let us understand. So this is one diagram which I had shown you in my previous lecture, and I'm showing you again. So here you see that there are thick bands of mature fibrous tissue, okay, and in between these fibrous tissue we are having nodules of regenerative hepatocytes, okay. So, and this is the gross image. This is the gross image. So look at these nodules. These are the regenerative nodules if you see from outside, okay. If you see in the gross image, this is how you will see. And just see how much the liver is shrunken. So in case of a cirrhotic liver, the liver will be shrunken and they will show multiple nodules, multiple regenerative nodules, as is seen in this particular diagram. So all are regenerative hepatocellular parenchymal nodules. Look at this diagram. So when we will read about cirrhosis in details, I am going to tell you there are two kinds of cirrhosis. One is micronodular, one is macronodular, depending on the size of the nodule. So look at this nodule. This is a very small nodule, and over here we are having a very big nodule. So here we are having both micronodular as well as macronodular cirrhosis. Okay, now look at this special diagram. Now this diagram shows a special stain. We have used a special stain called as Maison's trichome, and this stain basically stains the collagen blue in color, as we can see in this diagram. So these are the fibrous bands of tissue composed of collagen which stains blue. Okay, and in between we can see the regenerative parenchymal nodules. Okay. Now moving ahead, in case of chronic liver disease or chronic liver failure, the size of the nodule, pattern of scarring, the degree of parenchymal collapse, and the extent of vascular thrombosis, especially in the portal veins, all of these will vary between diseases and even between individuals with the same disease. So the size of the nodule that you see in chronic liver disease, the pattern of scarring you see, the degree of parenchymal collapse, and the extent of vascular thrombosis that you see, all of these will vary between diseases and even between individuals having the same disease. Now very important thing is the Child-Pugh classification of cirrhosis. Very, very, very important. So this classification is a prognostic classification, and it also correlates, okay, with the morphological features which are seen in histology. Okay, so there are three main kinds: class A, class B, class C. So class A is the well compensated cirrhosis, class B is partially decompensated, and class C is decompensated cirrhosis. So it is a prognostically useful classification which helps monitor the decline of patients on the path to chronic liver disease. So this is the okay. Before I come to this, I will show you the Child-Pugh's classification. Okay, this is the Child-Pugh's classification of cirrhosis. So why I want to show you this you will again read in medicine, but I wanted to show you over here also. So this is a prognostic classification, has a prognostic significance. You don't have to really, mug up the values, but what you will have to do, because in the MCQs they can ask you all of the following are components of Child-Pugh classification except. So serum bilirubin is one component, serum albumin is another, prothrombin time is one component, ascites is another component, hepatic encephalopathy is another component. So the Child-Pugh score is calculated by adding the scores of these 5 factors, and they can range from 5 to 15. So the Child-Pugh class can be A, that is a score of 5 to 6. It can be class B, 7 to 9, or class C, 10 or above. Decompensation, that is class C, indicates cirrhosis with a Child-Pugh score of more than 7, that is class B and above. So this level has been accepted criterion for listing for liver transplantation also. So now going back, okay, I had missed this particular point. So if on a biopsy, if you're looking under the microscope as a pathologist, and under the biopsy you have taken a liver biopsy from the patient, and under the biopsy you see that there are narrow fibrous septa with large islands of intact hepatocytes, mean the parenchyma is intact, so it is a favorable prognosis with less chances of developing portal hypertension. Whereas if you see broad bands of dense scar with dilated lymphatic spaces and less amount of intact hepatocytes or parenchyma, it is pointing towards a worse prognosis with increased chances of developing portal hypertension and end-stage liver disease. Okay, this we have already seen. Okay, moving ahead. So the Child-Pugh score, it correlates with different morphological features histologically, as I already told you before. Now, one very important point in case of chronic liver failure is the fact of stem cell activation, as I've already mentioned before. So it is seen in the form of ductular reactions. As you already know, in the previous video I have shown you how stem cell activation looks like and what is the importance of these ductular reactions. So as I already mentioned above before, that normally the hepatocytes, okay, they have quite a bit of the regenerative capacity. Okay, so they are having a very nice regenerative capacity. So normally any kind of liver injury, even for several years, can be managed by hepatocyte mitosis. Okay, it is only in the very end stages that the hepatocytes reach their age. Okay, they undergo replicative senescence. It is in that time when normal hepatocytes cannot regenerate and cannot give rise to more amount of hepatocyte. It is in that situation that the liver stem cells present in the canal of Hering, they get activated. Okay, so the role of liver stem cells in parenchymal regeneration increases in chronic and long-standing liver disease as the pre-existing hepatocytes have undergone replicative senescence. Okay, also these ductular reactions may incite some amount of scarring in chronic liver disease and thus may have a negative effect on progressive liver disease. So these ductular reactions, okay, that is, these ductular reactions are basically presenting stem cell activation, and once there is stem cell activation, that can also stimulate scarring in case of chronic liver disease. So ductular reaction is not a favorable thing under the microscope. So I would suggest everyone to go back and see the diagram of ductular reactions that I showed in the first part of this video. Okay, although uncommon, okay, sometimes regression of fibrosis can also occur in a fully established cirrhosis. Okay, suppose there is cirrhosis, okay, and a person is a chronic alcoholic and now the person has stopped taking alcohol. So we will see that slowly the fibrosis can reduce and there can be signs of regression. Okay, now end stage liver disease represents ineffective attempts to repair the ongoing past or intermittent injury. So what are the clinical features of chronic liver disease? So about 40% of the patients with cirrhosis, they are asymptomatic until the most advanced stages of disease. Yes, they are asymptomatic. Symptomatic patients of chronic liver failure presents with anorexia, weight loss and weakness. The most common cause of death in a chronic liver failure patient is hepatic encephalopathy or bleeding from esophageal varices because of portal hypertension, bacterial infections and hepatocellular carcinoma. Yes, cirrhosis also increases the chances of hepatocellular carcinoma. So as you all know that jaundice, encephalopathy and coagulopathy, they can be present in both acute as well as chronic liver failure. But in addition, chronic liver failure can have other manifestations. So persistent cholestasis can lead to pruritus, intense itching will be there in the perianal area, and which can sometimes become so severe that the patient can completely scratch the skin. Okay, so there can be severe pruritus. Again, impaired estrogen metabolism leading to hyperestrogenemia. So the level of estrogen becomes more, especially in males. This hyperestrogenemia, it can be seen in the form of palmar erythema. Yes, your palms will become reddish because of vasodilatation. And there is spider angiomas of the skin. So what is a spider angioma? These are central pulsating dilated arteriole from which small vessels radiate. I will show you a diagram of spider angioma. In males, the hyperestrogenemia can also lead to hypogonadism as well as gynecomastia. So look at this particular diagram. This is a spider angioma. You can see the central dilated veins and the radiating veins looking like a spider. This is called as spider angioma. Okay. So hypogonadism can also occur in case of women because of disruption of the hypothalamic pituitary axis function. Now the last kind of failure, we have already discussed about acute liver failure and chronic liver failure, and now we are going to discuss acute on chronic liver failure. So some individuals with stable but well compensated advanced chronic liver disease will suddenly develop signs of acute liver failure. Okay, for example, in patients with established established cirrhosis and extensive vascular shunting, the blood supply to the remaining liver parenchyma is already borderline, is already compromised, so it becomes highly vulnerable to any additional insult. So they're just saying, for example, there is a case of a chronic liver failure. Okay, for example, there is cirrhosis. So in a cirrhotic patient, in a case of cirrhosis, already whatever parenchyma is remaining, okay, they are already decompensated, meaning the blood supply is already compromised in a chronic liver failure patient. Okay, and any further insult can actually cause additional problems in the liver. So what are the examples of such condition of acute and chronic liver failure? Let us see. For example, hepatitis B infection with a super infection with hepatitis D. Ascending cholangitis in patients with primary sclerosing cholangitis or fibropolycystic liver disease. Medically suppressed hepatitis B in which viral mutants resistant to therapy develops. And sepsis, or for example, in a case of chronic liver disease, okay, they develop sepsis or they develop systemic cardiac failure. So they can be systemic insults also, or they can develop drug toxicity or malignancy or metastasis. So all of them is going to cause additional insult to the already decompensated liver. Okay, so this is all about liver failure, which was part 2 of the basics of liver. And I hope you have enjoyed this lecture. If you have any doubts, please do share and comments, and please do subscribe my channel. And thank you for watching this video, and I will come with more such videos. Stay tuned. Thank you very much, guys.